one-on-one. So there's some information here and some reflection activities and some options for folks to think through those decisions, but really recommend if you are thinking about that stuff and need somewhere to put it, to please set up an appointment with me or someone on my team. You can do that at career.ucla.edu. So you just want to spend half an hour to talk to someone about like, here are all the things that I like about my job. Here are all the things that I don't like about my job. Is this tenable or should I think about making a change? Right? I know that conversation is something that most people have with themselves kind of all the time, and it can be really hard to sort of focus on that for any sustained amount of time. So really recommend if you are thinking on that stuff to please make an appointment with me, and you also get my email address and all that fun stuff. Cool. So with career advancement, there's really sort of 3 steps that we see being important for folks for sort of making career advancement decisions. The first is figuring out what you want to do, right? Often people are like, I know I need to move up, and I'll ask why, and they don't have a why. And that's okay, right? But I think in most cases, people can make better decisions if they know their why, right? So there's some information there. And then there is quite a bit of information on assessing your current role. I think this is something that a lot of folks are thinking about. I think you all have a very in-demand skill set and a very exciting amount of opportunities and types of opportunities out there. So I really recommend that if you are feeling like 51% of your days or 51% of your time is not good time at where you're working, then maybe it's time to think about making a change of some sort. And again, that can be advocating for yourself for change responsibilities in your current role, or that could be looking for opportunities elsewhere, or both, right? And then finally, taking action. So I'm really going to focus on the negotiation piece. It's something that a lot of clients come to my team asking about, like, how do I actually do that? Like, I've never done it before. I've never done it during a job offer, or oh, great, sure. The negotiation process, I think, is something that folks are told that they should do, but don't necessarily have a ton of experience or comfort with. So with that in mind, let's get started. Again, there is a lot of sort of individual reflection and work that I think is best done on your own and when you have sort of time and space. So we'll move pretty briefly through those components, and then I'll spend the majority of our remaining time together to talk about negotiation. Before I get started, are there any questions or anything that you really want me to talk about or touch upon? Nope. Yeah. Great. Okay. And so, again, really breaking down what do you want out of your career and what do you want out of your life? And really, we've seen this break down into a few different things, right? Like, what do you want to be doing with your time is sort of a professional goal. What do you want your life to look like? Lives in those personal goals. And those financial goals are like, what kind of lifestyle do you want to lead, right? Do you have family that you need to support? Do you have a family that you want to grow? Do you want to be thinking about retirement? All of those sort of long-term components. Often people sort of lump those in with professional. We like to pull them out because money's complicated for people in the 2020s. And that's just the reality of things, right? So really recommend, there are a few exercises in here that are really time limited, and it's supposed to sort of give you an opportunity to do a bunch of brainstorming and get all of these thoughts in your head that are rattling around all the time down on paper so you can start organizing them. So we won't do these today because who wants to do career stuff during lunch before you've been fed? But really recommend check this out. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to email me. Cool. So when you have those goals in mind and sort of have organized them and prioritized them, the next piece is there alignment between what I'm doing now and the goals, right? What I want. And there are a few questions to consider, some sort of like big theme questions. But these are really sort of centered around, this slide is really on questions of, do you like what your job is doing for you now? And then the next slide will be, do you like what your job is doing for future you? And I think those questions are things that we, again, think about all the time, right? But don't necessarily have an organized way or a specific place to put those thoughts or to put those feelings. So again, these are just sample questions and things that we ask our clients all the time who are thinking about making a change or who are close to graduating and are going to have opportunities that they maybe didn't have before June 2024, right? So these are all, I think, really important questions, and they do really come down to time, money, and people, I think is really what it comes down to in many cases, right? The time that you have at work and the time that you have outside of work, are you happy with the divide between those things? Are you happy with the amount of those things? Money, do you have enough money for your own and your family's goals? And finally, people, right? Like, do you get to spend time with people you enjoy? You get to spend time with people you enjoy in your life, and do you have X amount of control over what that time can look like. Those are, I think, some of the biggest questions to consider for thinking about current roles, right? And thinking about if things are a good fit, or if things aren't a good fit, if there are changes that could be made, right? If you could talk with a supervisor and figure out if X, Y change can be made, that would make things much better for you, right? And really thinking about what are the most valuable and sort of strategic things to focus our time on, because everyone's always going to have stuff that they're not happy about, right? That's just us. That's just being human. But when we start to sort of get all these ideas out onto paper and can start sort of prioritizing which ones are most important, then people can make a lot of forward-feeling progress in finding out the thing that's most important to you and going for that. And getting that win can often be much more satisfying than getting a bunch of wins that don't actually impact the most important things to you, right? So next up, these are the sort of future-oriented questions, right? And really it comes down to how does the role that you're in right now, or the roles that you're in right now, which is often the case, the career that you want, right? Are they letting you demonstrate or develop or strengthen the skills that are going to be necessary for you to do your next thing or your next thing? Are you getting to build relationships with people who are doing the kind of work that you want to do, right? Having relationships with folks who are doing the kind of work that you want to do is probably the greatest predictor of moving into that work. Here. Awesome. So those are some questions around, is your current role fitting into sort of a longer term plan? And is this role also sort of building into the life that you want to have in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, right? And those questions are huge and I think require some time to think on. So again, we're not going to run through these today because no one needs to do this at lunchtime without being fed. And really, I think it is something that people should take maybe half an hour, if you can find half an hour for yourself to go through some of these activities, write out your responses to some of these questions, can really help organize. Yes, yep, yeah. Juan will send out a copy of these slides, and then you also have my email address. So if you're looking at when these slides are, Eddie, what are you talking about? Please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to talk that out. Cool. So yeah, again, a lot of the exercises that we include are very time limited because y'all are busy, like absurdly busy. And two, often we're thinking about this content all the time. And the stuff that comes to mind right at the start when someone says, what do you like about your job? What do you not like about your job? Right? Like there's stuff that just pops up, right? There's just things come up, and getting those captured can be a really powerful way of starting to organize those thoughts. Yeah. Hi, for folks who just joined us. Hi, my name is Eddie Clefe. I'm the Assistant Director of Master Students at the Career Center. Talking about career advancement today, talking about sort of how to figure out what goals are important to you, how to figure out if you want to stay in your current role and advocate for yourself, or if you want to pursue new opportunities. And then we're going to be talking about negotiation. And you'll get a copy of all these slides. You'll get a copy of, I think, this recording. So if you need to chill out and dissociate for 20 minutes, please enjoy that time. Awesome. Okay. So next up, so going through those exercises, you'll often sort of find things that you've been thinking on for months that you just haven't put words to. And in that case, really recommend from those previous questions, right? Of like, are you, the work you're doing now, the role that you're in now, is it fulfilling your life right now? If not, is it fulfilling enough things for your future where it makes sense? Right? Those kinds of questions are what I think people are always thinking about, right? It's kind of in the water, it's kind of in the air, but having focused time to do that can be complicated. So the point of those previous exercises are to get all those ideas onto paper and then to start playing around with them, right? Of ranking them. Is this like a 10, right? Is this one of the most important things that I want to do with my life, right? Or is this a really important thing in the life that I want to be able to provide for my family, right? Finding out those scores. And this is a really simple exercise and one that I do with a lot of my clients of, we write down all of the things that you like and all the things you don't like about your job or about sort of the trajectory of your career. And then we rank them and we give them a plus or minus, and then we just do a little bit of math. And if you're in the negatives, then you should probably make some changes because the work that you're doing now maybe isn't making you happy now. And if it's not contributing to a happier future, then life's too short, right? And work is too hard. So it makes sense for us to think about change. So those are those components. Really, I think the most important piece is to get those ideas organized and identify what's most important to you. And from there, we can take action that feels really impactful. And I think that is something that people could all use a bit more of, right? Of feeling like our actions have a ton of impact in our lives. So I'm going to focus the rest of our time together on sort of the logistics of negotiation. Who has negotiated a job offer before? Awesome. Who's negotiated as a raise with a boss? Awesome. Who's negotiated like changes in your job responsibilities? Cool. How were those conversations? Not fun, nerve-wracking, anxiety-inducing, weird, awkward, exciting for some folks to be able to have that agency, right? And say, like, this is what I want. Can I think be really exciting. And I think thinking about negotiation in different ways than we tend to think of as like a combative affair, I don't think is particularly helpful, right? So with negotiation in mind, I think it's good to remember that the point of a negotiation is not for someone to win, right? The point is for the parties to walk away happier than if they hadn't had that conversation. I often say that if you have ever tried to decide where you want to get dinner with a partner and you're both hungry, you can negotiate, right? That's all that is. It's figuring out, what do I want? What do you want? What do I not want? What do you not want? And where's the overlap, right? That's all negotiation is, right? It's not necessarily like a high pressure situation where someone has to win and someone has to lose. Life's just not really like that, or ideally it's not. Sometimes it is, but for these kinds of conversations, it is, I think, really good to remember that these processes are really, really normal, right? And if you ask for a raise, negotiate a higher salary, negotiate different benefits or a better title when you start a role, that can have huge impacts across your career. This is particularly true for women. This is particularly true for people of color. This is particularly true for women of color, that your ability to negotiate for yourself is unfortunately a really good predictor of the amount of income that you're going to make over your career. And I hate that that's the world that we live in, but I think it's good to know so that we can navigate it more effectively and make more money, right? Because at the end of the day, y'all do hard, very important work and should get paid more. So, and I think it's really important to note that these processes don't just benefit you, right? They benefit the folks who come after you. Because if you or someone like you has advocated for being treated or paid in a particular way, that can affect policy in the future. And that's, I think, something really important to think about. So with negotiation in mind, right, it's self-advocacy. It's the same way that you advocate for a patient is how you should advocate for yourself, right? You want to be treated the best way possible with the best resources possible, right? And that's a very fair thing to feel. So with that in mind, this is good stuff to have, but it is still nerve-wracking. It's still anxiety-inducing. I think people are often afraid, like, if I ask for more money in this job offer, they're going to take the job offer away, right? Like those kinds of fear-based thoughts are really common. So some things to sort of get around that. This timing issue, this is really for folks who really like their work and really like where they're working, but want to get paid more, or really like their work for one component and want to figure out how to get rid of that component of their work or to focus on other things in their work, right? So this is really about negotiating current roles. And really just thinking about probably the most important thing that you can do with negotiating is figuring out timing, right? Like most things in life, it's about timing. It's about luck in some ways. So it's important to think about if you are getting ready to have this conversation with a supervisor, or if it's something that you've been wanting to do for a long time and you're trying to put some action steps together. Thinking about the timing of your hospital system or the organization that you're with, thinking about the timing of your team, and thinking about timing of your supervisor are all sort of important factors to think about, right? People often ask, like, when's the best time to negotiate or when's the best time to look for a new job? There isn't a great cookie cutter answer, unfortunately. There's some like big macro statistics of like more job postings are put up in January and February than any other time in the year. But more people also apply during those times, right? There's no sort of happy answer, but instead it's thinking about sort of the local conditions that you're working with, right? When does your organization do performance reviews? When is the budget set? If you're in like a publicly funded hospital, like when is the budget set for the year? And that's that, right? You can do all that advocating you want, unless you are able to bring in money with a grant, the chances for you getting more money during that calendar year are pretty low, right? So thinking about those macro things. Next up is sort of team issues, right? Have you recently done something really cool? If that's the case, now could be a really good time to talk to your boss, right? There's evidence that you're a really valuable member of the team. You're a really valuable member uh, of the workforce here. And finally, sort of these individual issues with yourself, but also with your supervisor, right? When is the most and least stressful part of a supervisor's day or of their month, right? If they have to do a ton of reporting at the end of the month, then setting up a meeting to talk about your salary on Friday on the 27th at 4:30 p.m., maybe not a great time, right? Maybe it is. Maybe your boss really likes high pressure situations and really loves arguing about money at that time. But for most people, that's not necessarily the case, right? So just thinking about these things as we're figuring out these conversations. And not to say that you can only negotiate at the perfect time, but just you can set yourself up for better results if you think about that timing pretty critically before you get started, right? So, okay. So, great. What do I actually do, right? Like how do these processes actually work? I think what can be most helpful for folks on multiple levels is starting with determining numbers. So first is a walkaway number. And this one is most important for new roles in a lot of cases. It's just figuring out what is the lowest amount of money that I would be happy with. Not the lowest amount of money that me and my family could survive on, not the lowest amount of money that I could make work. What is the lowest amount of money that I could be happy with, that me and my family could be happy with, that me and my family could be secure with, right? Those are all important numbers to think about. This is particularly important for folks who are thinking about leaving a role and they're like, it's pretty good, but like money is sort of a big issue and I'd have to get paid significantly more to make a change. This can be a good way to determine what is significantly more, right? Often people are like, oh, like if I make, I don't know, $20,000 more a year, then I'll make a move. And is that based off of anything or just like a gut feeling? Sometimes the gut feeling's right and you do some math and oh yeah, that would actually make a huge difference for me and saving for my family. But maybe it's actually more significant, right? Or a smaller jump where it's like actually a $10,000 change could allow me and my family to do a lot more. So maybe I'll consider moving roles more seriously, right? So figuring out those numbers, I think, can be really valuable. There's some tools here that are essentially using the 50-30-20 budgeting rule. So 50% of your income goes to necessities, 30% goes to stuff you want to, and 20% goes into savings of some sort, right? So that's sort of a rule of a general rule that works for a lot of folks in figuring out sort of what is the low amount to work with. Yeah, and there's some worksheets and whatnot that are connected here, but again, no one wants to be looking at their budget at 12:26 on a on a Wednesday. It's like not the time, right? Thinking about timing. Okay, so there are a bunch of tools that again that are linked out here. Next up is determining salary range. Again, really important for when you're starting a role, but also really important if you're asking for a raise, right? How much more do you want? That kind of information can be hard to figure out. But the most important thing that you can do is doing comparison research, right? So when you're going for a new role, that's going on to different resources like I'll share on the next page where people can self-report their salary working in a particular company with a particular job title in a particular city or particular metro area, just to get some information on what are other people getting paid, right? This could also be a local conversation with coworkers if you feel comfortable bringing up that conversation, right? If you find out that someone who's been working at your same clinic for 2 years less than you is making significantly more money than you, don't get mad at them. That's not on them. Get mad at your boss, right? And that can be really good information to have when your performance review is coming up. Like, hey, like I have a bit more seniority. I do XYZ management tasks, and I think I'm really core to the functioning of our team. I'd like to get paid commensurate with my peers, right? That's hard to argue with, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean they're like, oh, perfect, let me grab my checkbook. But it does give them very clear logic around how to advocate for you if they need to talk to someone higher up, which often they do need to talk to someone higher up, right? So it's about sort of giving people some language, and we'll talk about how to produce those types of sentences or how to produce those types of streams of logic. But again, comparison research, really important, as local as possible. We live in, we all know, one of the most expensive places in the world. And that can be really helpful to know that if you and your family decide that you want to move to the suburbs of Denver, that like what looks like a pay cut could actually be significantly more money because of one's buying power in a different place. And these different tools like on Glassdoor, salary.com, Paysa, Indeed.com/career/salary, they all have abilities for you to sort of mess with like, okay, if I'm getting paid this amount in Los Angeles, what's the equivalent in Denver, right? Or and those can be really helpful if you're thinking about relocating, because sometimes we'll look at job postings kind of on a whim and be like, oh, that's a really low pay. But then you think about like, oh, that place is like, my rent would be $400. And then it's a very different conversation, right? Right. So these are some of the tools that I think are helpful for your walkaway, as well as your sort of salary range. And if the salary range is below your walkaway, you need to be looking at different roles, because even if you got the best job offer possible, but you're not making enough money to meet your needs and meet your family's needs and goals, then that probably isn't the most sustainable choice, right? Okay, cool. So another strategy in negotiation is thinking beyond salary, right? When people say like, oh, you need to negotiate a job offer, everyone, first thing comes to mind, right? It's like, how much am I getting paid? There are a lot of other things to think about, right? So money isn't just your salary, right? So this could be a relocation thing. If you are relocating and you're relocating to Minnesota, to a large hospital system, um, they should probably pay you a bit to help with your move, right? Because that's a huge move, and you're making a lot of changes. This could also look like childcare cost coverage, which is becoming more common, tuition reimbursement, which we have in the benefits section in some ways, sort of lives in both categories, but there are a lot of sort of different ways that organizations are offering money in different forms. That isn't just straight up salary, right? So something to think about. Next up are benefits. These can be a little harder to get moved around, but you can always ask, right? If they will start matching your retirement contributions after you're there for 2 years, can that be moved to 1 year? That happen? Or could the rate of match be 1% higher, right? You never know how much flexibility they have unless you ask. And as long as you are, again, coming to the conversation as a collaboration, right? Of like, you want to be happy and they want you happy, so you stick around, because hiring people is annoying, right? So it's really about like, I want to be happy, so I stay here for a long time. I really, really like the potential of what I could do at your hospital. Let's make that work. It's sort of the tone that I recommend people go with, instead of like, oh, could I please have this? Or the tone of like, I'm not going to do anything unless I see this number. Like, there's a happy medium there, right? And I think we all know that, but I think it can be good to say out loud, particularly in this conversation, which is one that people shy away from. And finally, there are sort of working conditions, right? There are a bunch of different things that you can ask on. Ones that are important, or an important thing to think about is, if you are currently negotiating with your supervisor and like money is just not going to work right now, like the budget has been set for the next 2 years and you really want to stay, right? Could some responsibilities be moved away from you if you don't want to do them? Or could you get additional responsibilities that lets you develop and demonstrate the skills that are going to be really valuable for when you start searching for a job next time around? Right? How do we get alignment between what is possible at your current org and what you want to do one role down the line or 2 roles down the line? And thinking about job responsibilities, job titles, professional development opportunities, those can all be good long term, right? They're not as nice as getting a 10% raise, right? But they can help you if you really do want to be doing this kind of, I don't know, you want to develop skills in training nurses. Yeah, 5 minutes? Okay, great. Okay, I'll stop talking on that. So those are just different categories of things to think about, right? It doesn't just need to be salary. It doesn't just need to be hourly rate. There are many things to think about and talk about. Recommend, kind of similar to the other ones, giving yourself 3 categories: a need to have, a want to have, and a nice to have list. and putting those things in each of those columns. And once you have those categories, you know what you actually want to negotiate on, right? You can say, like, these are the most important things to me, or you can offer stuff on the like to have list. And when they shoot it down, you're, okay, well, that would have been nice, but could we do this? And you bring up something that's actually important to you, right? It just gives you some organization around, what do I offer? What do I feel good being flexible about? And what is really important for me to stay and be happy? Okay. Next up is developing talking points, which is the last thing that I have today. And this is where we start getting language around, how do we have this conversation, right? How do we talk about this? So in order to do this, it can be really helpful. Take a few minutes, think about these things, right? The things that you've done, because you've done a lot, right? You don't end up with a place like UCLA doing the work that you do without doing a lot. So that's important to remember. So take some time, jot these ideas down, jot these experiences down. And the strategy is to connect those achievements, those skills, those experiences to something in the role responsibility and some benefit you can add to your team or the organization, right? It's how do you connect those three things together, right? Of like supervising people, and you've trained 30 nurses in different clinical settings. You could jump into a training role and like take on training responsibilities in your current job tomorrow, right? That gives a supervisor or someone who can advocate on your behalf a very clear line of logic to advocate for you, right? To sort of connect the dots for them. It's what we're trying to do for people, right? Of like, they know this, we know this, but without saying it out loud and without saying it multiple times, it can often get lost on people. So have some examples here to sort of look around. If you go through an interview process and you name a number and afterwards you're like, oh, I should have asked for more. That happens a lot. It's really, really common. Here's an example of what you can do in that situation, right? You get the job offer, you're like, oh, thank you so much. I'll take the weekend to consider this. Let's have a Zoom call on Monday. During the Zoom call, what do you say? Right, and here's an example, right, of like, oh, like I know I named this number during the process, but after learning more about the role and doing some comparison research, I'd actually be happier with this range. What do you think about that? And that just really clearly demonstrates like this isn't coming from, I just want more money. It's coming from like, I learned more about the role. I learned about these management responsibilities. I've seen what that looks like at other hospitals in the LA area. And this is what it would take to make me happy. What do you think? Right? And then if they ask like, oh, well, let's talk about that, you can say like, well, I do this part. And I think that could allow me to benefit your team in this way really quickly. Right? So you have a lot of information, you have a lot of connecting the dots for them, again, which is really sort of the crux of this work. So that's an example for increasing a salary range you named earlier in a process. Here's one, responding to an offer. So if you get an offer and you want to bump up the base salary a little bit, here's some example language you can use. And again, it's about identifying a role responsibility, your experiences, and a way you could benefit the team, right? If you have those three components, then the information that you're sharing is probably going to be more effective than if you only had one or two of those things. And finally, here's one offering or responding to an offer when you've done salary range research and you're like, oh, this would put me in the bottom 10% of salary for this particular role in this metro area, and I'm not happy about that. Right? Here's a way that you can include. Here's some example language. Okay, so that is all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful. I know this conversation isn't a fun one, but it's an important one, which is most of the conversations I have with people. It's not super fun to talk about resumes and negotiating, but it can be. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll get a copy of these slides. You'll get a copy of this recording. You'll get my email address. Don't hesitate to reach out. I think I've presented to some of you before, but I say it every time. My services are free because you've already paid for them. So get your money's worth. Those student fees, we did the math once, and I like 0.0007 cents of those student fees pays for my salary. So get your 0.0007 cents worth out of me. All right. Thanks all.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah.
Go ahead and stop recording here.
Yes.